What would you do if you discovered that a cherished family heirloom contained evidence of unspeakable acts committed by your own ancestors? Would you destroy it to protect their memory, or would you expose the truth, no matter how horrifying? On a crisp autumn morning in 1936, as the golden leaves fell over the rolling hills of Harlan County, Kentucky, local Sheriff Thomas Halstead received a phone call that would lead to the discovery of one of the most disturbing cases in American criminal history. The voice on the other end belonged to Elijah Monroe, a 67-year-old handyman who had been hired to clear out the abandoned Sheppard family estate following the death of its last known heir, Margaret Sheppard, at the age of 94. What began as a routine estate clearance would soon unravel a web of depravity that had remained hidden within the walls of the Victorian mansion for over 5 decades. The Sheppard family had once been among the most respected in eastern Kentucky, having amassed considerable wealth from coal mining operations in the late 1800s. They had constructed an imposing 3-story mansion on 200 acres of pristine woodland just outside the small town of Cumberland. The family was known for their philanthropy, funding the construction of the local church, school, and hospital. The 5 Sheppard sisters, Elizabeth, Catherine, Victoria, Josephine, and Margaret, were fixtures of local society, hosting elaborate teas and charity functions that drew visitors from as far as Louisville and Lexington. "I ain't never seen nothing like it in all my days," Monroe would later testify to the county prosecutor. "Was cleaning out the attic, moving some old trunks, when I found this hidden panel in the floor. Thought maybe it was some valuable jewelry or such. Lord knows I wish that's all it had been." What Monroe discovered was a meticulously preserved family album, bound in dark burgundy leather, its pages yellowed with age, but impeccably maintained. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a collection of family photographs dating back to 1875. But as Monroe turned the pages, he found himself confronted with images that defied comprehension. "I served in the Great War," he said, his voice breaking during his official statement. "Saw things over there no man should ever see. But these pictures were worse than anything. In them trenches in France, the Harlan County Sheriff's Department immediately sealed off the Sheppard estate and launched an investigation that would eventually involve the Federal Bureau of Investigation. What they uncovered in that leather-bound album and subsequently throughout the mansion would shock the nation and forever alter the legacy of the once revered Sheppard family. The album contained over 300 photographs documenting 5 decades of ritualistic activities conducted by the Sheppard sisters. Beginning around 1880, when Elizabeth, the eldest, was 22, the images chronicled the evolution of what investigators would later classify as a cult dedicated to what the sisters themselves referred to in their written materials as the sacred feminine ascension. The initial photographs appeared relatively innocuous, wrote FBI Special Agent Robert Caldwell in his 1937 report. Young women in white dresses conducting what seemed to be harmless ceremonies in the mansion's extensive gardens. However, as the timeline progressed, the nature of these gatherings became increasingly disturbing, eventually depicting acts of sexual deviancy, apparent ritual bloodletting, and what can only be described as human sacrifice. The most troubling aspect of the investigation was the realization that the Sheppard sisters had not acted alone. The photographs identified at least 76 different individuals who had participated in their ceremonies over the years, including prominent members of Kentucky society, doctors, lawyers, local politicians, and even a circuit court judge, Dr. Samuel Richardson, the county medical examiner assigned to the case, noted in his preliminary findings that many of the ritualistic practices documented in the album appeared to incorporate elements from various occult traditions, but with significant modifications unique to the Sheppard sisters. "It is my professional assessment," he wrote, "that the Sheppard sisters created their own syncretic belief system, borrowing elements from European witchcraft traditions, ancient fertility cults, and possibly certain Gnostic texts. However, the centrality of sexual practices and the apparent consumption of bodily fluids suggests a fundamentally original cosmology developed by the sisters themselves. The investigation took a more sinister turn when authorities began excavating certain areas of the estate grounds based on clues found in the album and accompanying journals. In a remote corner of the property, beneath an ornate gazebo surrounded by a circle of willow trees, investigators discovered the remains of 17 individuals, 15 women and 2 men, all between the ages of 16 and 25. The condition and positioning of the remains indicate that these were not conventional murders, noted Dr. Richardson. The bodies were arranged in a specific pattern, forming what appears to be a 5-pointed star. Most troubling is evidence suggesting the victims were kept alive for extended periods, possibly years, before their eventual deaths. Further forensic analysis revealed that the victims had been subjected to repeated bloodletting, with evidence of surgical precision in the placement of incisions. Many of the remains showed signs of malnutrition and prolonged physical restraint. Most disturbing of all, several of the female victims appeared to have given birth while in captivity, yet no infant remains were discovered on the property. As investigators delved deeper into the Sheppard sisters' journals and correspondence, a picture emerged of a cult that had operated with virtual impunity for decades, protected by wealth, social standing, and a network of influential accomplices. The sisters referred to their victims as vessels, and documented in clinical detail the various extractions and ceremonies performed upon them. "We have achieved a significant breakthrough," wrote Elizabeth Sheppard in an entry dated June 18, 1897. Subject 7 responded exceptionally well to the third-stage extraction process. The essence obtained was of superior quality, far surpassing our previous attempts. Catherine believes we are finally approaching the correct formulation. Victoria remains skeptical, but even she cannot deny the luminescence observed in the final solution. Josephine will begin preparations for the midsummer elevation immediately. Perhaps most chilling were the indications that the sisters' activities had not been confined to their estate. References in their journals pointed to connections with similar groups in New Orleans, Boston, and San Francisco. Letters exchanged with individuals in these locations suggested a broader network, dedicated to practices similar to those developed by the Sheppard sisters. One such correspondence, dated October 3, 1912, from someone identifying themselves only as the Oracle of Nob Hill, read, "Your methods have proven most efficacious, dear Elizabeth. Our San Francisco circle has successfully replicated the third elevation with remarkable results. The luminosity you described was indeed present, lasting a full 17 minutes before dissipation. We eagerly await instructions for the winter solstice convergence and have begun acquiring suitable vessels as per your specifications." As the investigation progressed, authorities faced mounting obstacles. Key witnesses died under mysterious circumstances. Evidence disappeared from secured locations. Officials who had initially supported the investigation suddenly recused themselves or actively worked to impede its progress. It became increasingly clear that we were dealing with something far more extensive than 5 elderly sisters and their local accomplices, recalled Sheriff Halstead in a 1952 interview. Years after his retirement, there were forces at work, actively protecting what the Sheppard sisters had built, forces with reach extending well beyond Harlan County. The most perplexing aspect of the case was the apparent longevity and vitality of the Sheppard sisters themselves. According to official records, Elizabeth Sheppard had been born in 1858, which would have made her 78 at the time of her death in 1936. However, photographs of her taken just months before her death showed a woman who appeared to be in her 50s, with barely a wrinkle on her face or a grey hair on her head. Similar age discrepancies were noted for all 5 sisters. Dr. Richardson's examination of the sisters' remains yielded equally baffling results. The cellular structure of the tissue samples is unlike anything I have previously encountered, he wrote in a report that was subsequently classified by federal authorities. There is evidence of extensive regenerative capability at the cellular level that defies current medical understanding. In layman's terms, their bodies appear to have aged at approximately half the normal human rate. The investigation into the Sheppard sisters' case was abruptly halted in 1938 when a fire of unknown origin destroyed much of the physical evidence, including the infamous family album. The federal government classified most of the case files, citing national security concerns, a highly unusual designation for what had been categorized as a local murder investigation. Most of the officials involved in the case were reassigned, including FBI Special Agent Caldwell, who was transferred to a remote field office in Alaska. Sheriff Halstead was forced into early retirement following a series of anonymous accusations regarding his conduct. Dr. Richardson died in a single-vehicle accident on a straight stretch of road on a clear night, just days after submitting his final report on the case. For decades, the Sheppard sisters' case remained largely forgotten, relegated to local legend status in Harlan County. The mansion itself was demolished in 1942, and the land was purchased by a corporation with ties to the federal government. The area was fenced off, designated as a watershed protection zone, and access has remained restricted to this day. We had stumbled onto something that certain powerful people wanted kept buried, Halstead maintained, until his death in 1968. Something beyond ordinary crime, beyond ordinary evil. Something that threatened not just reputations or careers, but an entire world view. They weren't covering up what the Sheppard sisters did. They were covering up what the Sheppard sisters knew. The case might have remained buried forever, if not for the persistence of one man. James Monroe, the grandson of Elijah Monroe, the handyman who had first discovered the hidden album. Having grown up hearing his grandfather's nightmarish stories about the Sheppard estate, James became obsessed with uncovering the truth. "My grandfather was never the same after what he found in that attic," James recalled during a 1978 interview with the Louisville Courier-Journal. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, talking about the sisters watching him. "Before he died, he made me promise I would find out what really happened, what they were really doing in that house. He said it didn't end with them, that it was still going on. After decades of research and numerous Freedom of Information Act requests, James Monroe managed to obtain portions of the original investigation files. Though heavily redacted, these documents provided enough information for him to begin tracing the connections mentioned in the Sheppard sisters' correspondence. His investigation led him to San Francisco in 1982, where he discovered that the Oracle of Nob Hill had been Agatha Wainwright, the widow of a gold rush millionaire. The Wainwright mansion on Russian Hill had been the site of numerous exclusive gatherings between 1890 and 1929. After Agatha's death, the property had passed to her niece, Camilla Wainwright, who had continued the traditions established by her aunt. "I managed to locate a former servant of the Wainwright household," wrote James in his unpublished manuscript. The Sheppard Legacy. Maria Gonzalez had worked as a maid in the mansion from 1926 to 1931. What she witnessed there corroborated everything my grandfather had discovered in Kentucky. The same rituals, the same vessels, even the same terminology for their ceremonies. According to Gonzalez's testimony, the Wainwright gatherings always took place during significant astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, and certain planetary alignments. The participants, primarily women from wealthy families, would arrive in ordinary evening attire, but would change into ceremonial white gowns upon entering the mansion's private chambers. They would bring them in through the service entrance, Gonzalez recalled. Young girls, sometimes boys, always poor, always desperate. They told us these were charity cases, troubled youth being given a chance at a better life through service in a prestigious household. But we never saw them leave, and the sounds that came from the cellar on those special nights. Santa Maria, I still hear them in my dreams. James Monroe's investigation would eventually lead him to similar sites in Boston, New Orleans, Chicago, and even London and Paris. In each location, he found evidence of groups with practices identical to those of the Sheppard sisters, all apparently connected through correspondence and occasional gatherings of their leadership. This wasn't just a local cult, he concluded. It is an international network of practitioners, all pursuing the same goal: extended youth and longevity through what can only be described as ritual energy vampirism. And based on my research, they're still active today, having simply adapted their methods to the modern world. Monroe's claims might have been dismissed as conspiracy theories if not for the disappearance of 27-year-old journalist Rebecca Chen in 1986. Chen had been working with Monroe on an exposé about the modern manifestations of the Sheppard sisters cult. 3 days before their findings were to be published, Chen vanished from her San Francisco apartment. The only clue was a small silver pendant in the shape of an ornate letter S left on her desk, identical to symbols found in the original Sheppard family album. Monroe himself died under suspicious circumstances in 1988. Officially ruled a suicide, despite numerous inconsistencies in the police report. His research notes and manuscript disappeared from his home, and the investigation into Chen's disappearance was closed due to lack of evidence. The story might have ended there. Just another unsolved mystery, if not for a series of strange discoveries beginning in 2010. Construction workers renovating a historic building in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood found a hidden room containing journals dating from 1900 to 1962. The journals belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a socialite with connections to some of New England's oldest families. They detailed her involvement in what she called the Sisterhood of Sacred Extraction and referenced the Sheppard family as the American Founders. Similar discoveries followed in Charleston, South Carolina, and Santa Barbara, California. Hidden caches of documents, photographs, and ritual objects, all connected to wealthy women who had lived extraordinarily long lives, while maintaining unusual youth and vitality well into their advanced years. In 2015, digital security analyst Marcus Reed identified a pattern of encrypted communications on the dark web that used terminology strikingly similar to that found in the Sheppard sisters' journals. The communications referenced vessels, extractions and elevations, and discussed meeting locations corresponding to properties owned by shell companies traced back to descendants of individuals named in the original investigation. Whatever the Sheppard sisters started in that Kentucky mansion, it didn't die with them, Reed stated in a podcast interview shortly before his unexpected death from natural causes at the age of 34. They created something that transcended their individual lives, something that continues to evolve and adapt. Based on the communications I've intercepted, they're planning something they call the Grand Convergence for the upcoming winter solstice. Something unprecedented in scale. Reed's final message to his colleagues was a set of coordinates pointing to a remote location in the Appalachian Mountains, less than 30 miles from the original Sheppard estate. Satellite imagery of the area shows what appears to be a complex of buildings accessible only by a single private road. Property records indicate it belongs to the Luminous Future Foundation, a private research institute dedicated to extending human potential through revolutionary biological approaches. The foundation lists among its board members descendants of families from Harlan County, San Francisco, Boston, and New Orleans, all with connections to the original Sheppard investigation. Their public research focuses on cellular regeneration and longevity treatments, with clinical trials showing remarkably promising results in reversing the aging process. We stand on the threshold of a new era in human evolution, Dr. Eliza Chambers, the Foundation's director and great-granddaughter of a prominent Harlan County judge, stated in a recent press release, "Our proprietary treatments have demonstrated the potential to extend human lifespan by as much as 50%, with test subjects showing significant rejuvenation at the cellular level. We anticipate FDA approval for limited applications within 5 years. What the press release fails to mention is the unusually high number of missing persons cases reported within a 50-mile radius of the Foundation's research facility. Over the past decade, more than 60 individuals between the ages of 16 and 25 have disappeared from surrounding communities. Local law enforcement has noted patterns similar to historical cases connected to the original Sheppard investigation. Vulnerable individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds with few family connections, unlikely to be missed or sought after. It's happening all over again, claimed anonymous whistleblower Jane, allegedly a former employee of the Luminous Future Foundation, in a 2022 online post that was removed within hours of publication. The extraction protocols, the cellular treatments, it's all based on the Sheppard methodology. They've just modernized it given its scientific window dressing. But at its core, it's the same thing those sisters were doing in 1880. And the board members, I've seen them. Women in their 80s who look 40. Men over 90 who move like they're in their prime. Whatever they're taking, whatever they're doing, it's not on any FDA approval pathway. The post included images purported to be from the Foundation's restricted sub-level facilities, showing rooms with equipment that combined cutting-edge medical technology with elements reminiscent of the ritual spaces described in the original Sheppard investigation. Before these images could be verified, they were purged from all servers, and individuals who had downloaded them reported sophisticated cyber attacks that erased all copies. Official inquiries into the Luminous Future Foundation have consistently been blocked, with multiple federal agencies citing national security protocols. Recent Freedom of Information Act requests regarding the original Sheppard investigation have been denied on similar grounds, despite the case being nearly 90 years old. What began as a local horror in a Kentucky mansion has evolved into something far more insidious. A shadow network operating at the highest levels of society, pursuing immortality through means both ancient and modern. The Sheppard sisters may be long dead, but their legacy continues, transformed and adapted for a new era. "I can feel them watching me," wrote James Monroe in his final journal entry found after his death. Not just people, but something else, something older. The sisters tapped into something beyond our understanding, something that used them as much as they used it. And now it's using others. The faces change, but the hunger remains the same. It will never stop. It can never be satisfied. As the winter solstice approaches, unusual activity has been reported around the Luminous Future Foundation facility. Satellite imagery shows increased vehicle traffic and the construction of what appears to be a large circular structure on the grounds. Power consumption at the facility has tripled, according to leaked utility records. Local residents report strange lights in the sky above the complex and unusual animal behavior in the surrounding forests. Some claim to hear distant chanting carried on the night wind, echoing through the valleys, voices that sound both ancient and somehow inhuman. Meanwhile, the Luminous Future Foundation has announced an exclusive retreat for its most prominent supporters, scheduled for the week of the winter solstice. The guest list includes influential figures from politics, finance, technology, and entertainment, individuals with the power to shape global events. Whatever began in that Kentucky mansion in 1880 continues to this day, evolving and expanding its influence. The five sisters, who once hosted tea parties for local society, now have spiritual descendants hosting gatherings of global elites. The methods have been refined, the language modernized, but the fundamental hunger remains unchanged, the drive to transcend human limitations, to achieve immortality through the systematic exploitation of others. And somewhere in the Appalachian darkness, in rooms hidden from public view, the extraction protocols continue. The vessels serve their purpose. The luminous solution is prepared, and the sisters' vision moves ever closer to its ultimate fulfillment. Have you ever felt that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, as though unseen eyes were watching your every move? What if that feeling wasn't just paranoia, but recognition of a predatory presence that has been stalking humanity for centuries? As the investigation into the Sheppard sisters and their modern descendants continues, researchers have uncovered disturbing parallels between their practices and certain historical phenomena previously attributed to superstition or coincidence. The sisters' journals, fragments of which survived the 1938 fire, contain references to much older traditions and texts, suggesting they had not invented their practices, but rather refined techniques passed down through generations. Dr. Amelia Richardson, granddaughter of the original medical examiner and professor of anthropology at Miskatonic University, has spent the past 15 years studying these connections. Her controversial research, largely dismissed by mainstream academia but supported by a small group of dedicated scholars, suggests the Sheppard sisters were part of a tradition dating back to at least the early 17th century. What my grandfather discovered in 1936 was merely one manifestation of a much older phenomenon, Dr. Richardson explained in a 2018 lecture that subsequently led to her tenure review. The Sheppard methodology represents a significant evolution in technique, but the underlying principles can be traced through historical records across multiple continents and cultures. Richardson's research points to a series of seemingly unrelated historical events that, when examined collectively, reveal a disturbing pattern. In 1623, the Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory was sealed in her castle after allegedly murdering hundreds of young women and bathing in their blood to maintain her youth. In 1744, several prominent women of Parisian society were implicated in a scandal involving the abduction of children and their use in rejuvenation ceremonies directed by a mystic known only as La Voisin. In 1896, Boston socialite Abigail Weatherby was quietly committed to a private asylum after servants discovered what was described as a blood extraction laboratory in the cellar of her Beacon Hill mansion. These are not isolated incidents, insisted Richardson. They represent glimpses of a continuous tradition that has adapted itself to different eras and social contexts while maintaining its essential methodology, the extraction of vital essence from young victims to extend the lives and vitality of practitioners. Most controversial is Richardson's assertion that this tradition has consistently involved women of high social standing, particularly in families with substantial wealth maintained over multiple generations. Her analysis of genealogical records and historical photographs suggests certain prominent families have displayed unusually long lifespans and retained youthful appearances well into advanced age, often coinciding with periods of unexplained disappearances in surrounding communities. The Sheppard sisters were unique, not in what they did, but in the systematic way they documented their practices, noted Richardson. Their methodical approach, combining elements of ritual, pseudoscience, and genuine biological insight, represented a quantum leap forward in efficiency. Previous practitioners had relied on quantity, dozens or even hundreds of victims required for minimal results. The Sheppards developed techniques that dramatically increased yield while reducing the number of vessels needed. Richardson's research took an unexpected turn in 2020 when she was contacted by Dr. Sophia Chen, sister of the journalist Rebecca Chen, who disappeared in 1986 while investigating the modern continuation of the Sheppard cult. Dr. Chen, a biochemist specializing in cellular regeneration, had been conducting her own investigation into her sister's disappearance when she made a startling discovery. I believe I've identified the biological mechanism behind the Sheppard extraction process, Chen stated in a recorded interview with Richardson that was never publicly released. My analysis of historical descriptions of their procedures, combined with modern understanding of cellular biology, suggests they were targeting specific stem cell populations and their associated growth factors. What's most disturbing is that their empirical methods anticipated scientific discoveries that wouldn't be made for another 70 years. According to Chen's analysis, the Sheppard extraction rituals, stripped of their ceremonial elements, bear a striking resemblance to certain experimental stem cell harvesting procedures currently being explored in cutting-edge medical research. The sisters focus on young subjects, particularly those in their late teens and early 20s, aligns with modern understanding of peak stem cell potency and telomerase activity. They couldn't have known the cellular mechanisms involved, yet they somehow developed procedures that effectively harvested and preserved exactly the biological materials we now know are critical to cellular regeneration, Chen explained. It's as if they were guided by some intuitive understanding that transcended the scientific knowledge of their time. Chen's investigation led her to review the public research published by the Luminous Future Foundation. While their official publications focused on conventional approaches to longevity, Chen identified subtle abnormalities in their reported results that suggested access to biological materials beyond what would be available through standard research protocols. Their published results show cellular regeneration rates that exceed anything achievable with current ethical research methods, she noted. The only way to obtain such results would be through extremely invasive harvesting procedures that would be impossible to perform within regulatory guidelines. Chen's suspicions deepened when she managed to obtain employment at a diagnostic laboratory that processed samples for the Luminous Future Foundation. During her brief tenure there, she observed unusual samples being processed under heightened security protocols, samples that contained cellular materials with telomere lengths and regenerative capabilities that should have been biologically impossible. These weren't ordinary research samples, she insisted. Whoever they came from had cellular characteristics unlike anything in the published literature. The telomere preservation alone suggested biological age reversal of 20 to 30 years. Chen's employment was terminated after just 3 months, officially due to budget constraints. 1 week later, her apartment was broken into and all of her research materials were stolen. 2 days after speaking with Dr. Richardson, Chen disappeared while walking from her laboratory to her car. The only trace left behind was a small silver pendant in the shape of an ornate letter S, identical to the one found after her sister's disappearance 36 years earlier. The investigation into Chen's disappearance stalled quickly, with local authorities citing lack of evidence and jurisdictional complications. Dr. Richardson, however, continued to pursue both the historical and contemporary aspects of what she now referred to as the Sheppard continuity. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source: 17-year-old Lily Winters, who had escaped from what was officially designated as a wellness center for troubled youth in rural West Virginia. The facility, operated by the Renewal Health Initiative, a subsidiary of the Luminous Future Foundation, had been praised in local media for its innovative approach to adolescent mental health treatment. Winter's account of what actually occurred within the facility painted a very different picture. According to her testimony, recorded by Richardson before the girl's subsequent disappearance, the center housed approximately 30 adolescents and young adults, all from disadvantaged backgrounds, many from the foster care system or juvenile detention facilities. They told us we were participating in advanced wellness treatments that would help regulate our emotions and improve our overall health, Winters stated. At first it seemed legitimate: regular meals, comfortable accommodations, friendly staff. But then the special treatments began. Winters described being subjected to a series of increasingly invasive procedures, beginning with extended blood draws and spinal taps, progressing to what she described as harvesting sessions that left participants bedridden for days afterward. These sessions always coincided with specific lunar phases and were preceded by what the staff referred to as preparation rituals. They would bathe us in this solution that smelled like herbs and something metallic, she recalled. Then they'd dress us in these white gowns with this symbol embroidered on them, this stylized S with little branches coming off it. They'd give us this drink that made everything hazy, and we'd be taken to this big circular room. Downstairs, Winter's description of the circular room matched elements found in both the original Sheppard estate and subsequent locations identified in James Monroe's investigation. A circular chamber with 5 alcoves positioned at equal distances around the perimeter, a raised platform in the center, and a complex design inlaid on the floor, incorporating astronomical and geometric patterns. There were always 5 of them in charge of each session, Winters continued. 5 women in these dark red robes. They never used names, just called each other sister. They'd position us on this platform and begin chanting, not in English, something older. That's when they'd start the extraction. Winters described a process combining modern medical equipment with ritualistic elements, intravenous lines and collection apparatus alongside ceremonial daggers, chalices and incantations. The collected materials, blood, cerebrospinal fluid, and what Winters described as a glowing silver substance extracted from the base of the spine, were processed through both mechanical equipment and ritual procedures involving the mixing of solutions in specific patterns and sequences. After each full moon session, one of the sisters would drink this final solution they created, Winters recalled. You could actually see them change, like watching someone get younger right before your eyes. Their skin would tighten, the grey would disappear from their hair, even their posture would improve. It was like they were absorbing our youth directly into themselves. Winters managed to escape during a power outage caused by a severe thunderstorm. She fled into the surrounding forest and eventually made her way to a highway where she was picked up by a long-haul trucker. Fearing she wouldn't be believed, or worse, would be returned to the facility, she avoided authorities and eventually connected with an underground network of trafficking survivors who put her in touch with Dr. Richardson. After recording Winters' testimony, Richardson arranged for the girl to stay with trusted colleagues while she pursued corroborating evidence. 2 days later, Winters vanished from the supposedly secure location. Richardson's colleagues reported a sophisticated intrusion that bypassed multiple security systems. Once again, the only item left behind was a small silver pendant in the shape of an ornate letter S. The pattern was becoming clear. Anyone who came too close to exposing the modern iteration of the Sheppard methodology disappeared, with the silver pendant left as both calling card and warning. Despite the obvious danger, Richardson continued her investigation, focusing now on the corporate and financial structures surrounding the Luminous Future Foundation and its various subsidiaries. What she uncovered was a vast network of shell companies, private trusts and non-profit organizations, all ultimately connected to a central entity called the Ascension Holdings Group. This holding company, registered in the Cayman Islands, showed a corporate lineage dating back to 1887, just 7 years after Elizabeth Sheppard had documented the first successful third-stage extraction in her journals. Most revealing were the Ascension Holdings Group's board members, whose biographies showed striking inconsistencies. Facial recognition analysis performed on photographs of board members from the 1960s through the present day suggested several individuals had aged at approximately half the normal human rate. Even more disturbing, genetic analysis of hair samples surreptitiously collected from 2 board members indicated telomere lengths consistent with biological ages decades younger than their chronological ages. They've created a perfect corporate facade for continuing the Sheppard methodology in the modern era, Richardson concluded in her final research notes. The wellness centers provide a steady supply of vessels. The Research Foundation provides scientific legitimacy and access to cutting-edge technology. The financial structure ensures both protection from scrutiny and the vast resources needed to maintain their operation. Richardson's investigation came to an abrupt halt in 2023 when she was killed in what was officially ruled a home invasion gone wrong. Her research materials disappeared. Her digital files were corrupted by what forensic analysts described as unusually sophisticated malware. Richardson and the few colleagues aware of her work received clear warnings to abandon any related research. The story might have ended there. Another thread in the conspiracy severed, another threat to the Sheppard continuity eliminated. But 3 months after Richardson's death, portions of her research began appearing anonymously on obscure internet forums, quickly removed, but not before being downloaded and distributed through encrypted channels. These fragments, combined with new testimonies from individuals claiming to have escaped from various wellness centers across the country, painted a picture of an operation far larger and more sophisticated than even Richardson had suspected. The Luminous Future Foundation and its various front organizations operated facilities in at least 17 states, all following the same basic methodology adapted from the original Sheppard protocols. Most disturbing were the indications that the organization had extended its influence into mainstream medical research and biotechnology. Several prominent pharmaceutical companies had established research partnerships with Luminous Future subsidiaries, focusing on novel approaches to cellular regeneration and longevity. Patents filed by these partnerships contained subtle but unmistakable elements derived from the Sheppard methodology, stripped of their ritualistic components but retaining the essential biological processes. Former employees of these research initiatives, speaking anonymously, described being compartmentalized in a way that prevented anyone outside the inner circle from recognizing the true nature of the work. Each team focused on a narrow aspect of the process, seeing only legitimate scientific applications, while the leadership integrated these components into the larger Sheppard framework. "We thought we were developing treatments for degenerative diseases," stated one whistleblower, a former research director at a Luminous Future subsidiary. "The cellular regeneration mechanisms we were studying showed enormous therapeutic potential. It was only when I accidentally accessed restricted research protocols that I realized where the raw materials were coming from and what the complete treatment entailed." According to this whistleblower, the modern extraction process had been refined to maximize efficiency while minimizing detection risk. The ritualistic elements, originally central to the Sheppard methodology, had been maintained for the inner circle, but were no longer strictly necessary for the biological processes. The ceremonial aspects had become a matter of tradition rather than functional requirement. The 5 sisters who run the whole operation still perform the complete ritual for themselves, the whistleblower claimed. But for their secondary tier of beneficiaries, the politicians, celebrities, and billionaires who pay for access to the treatments, they've developed a streamlined version that appears entirely medical. The clients never see the vessels or understand the true source of their rejuvenation. This 2-tier system, ritual-based treatments for the inner circle, medicalized procedures for wealthy clients, allowed the organization to expand its influence while maintaining its essential secrecy. The inner circle, apparently still structured around 5 principal sisters in emulation of the original Sheppard family, controlled access to the most effective treatments while using diluted versions as leverage with powerful individuals in government, industry, and media. Evidence of these connections emerged in 2024, when investigative journalist Michael Torres managed to infiltrate an exclusive retreat at a Luminous Future facility in Northern California. Using sophisticated surveillance equipment, Torres documented a gathering of what he described as the most influential power brokers in the western United States, including 2 senators, several tech billionaires, a major Hollywood producer, and at least 3 individuals who appeared to be high-ranking military or intelligence officials. They were there for what was described as proprietary rejuvenation treatments, available nowhere else in the world, Torres reported in a podcast released just hours before his disappearance. I observed multiple individuals entering the facility looking their chronological age and emerging days later with visibly reduced signs of aging. One particular senator, age 72 according to public records, emerged looking no older than 50. Torres also documented a separate, more restricted area of the facility that only certain individuals, all women, were permitted to enter. This area, which Torres was unable to access directly, appeared to be the site of more intensive procedures involving what staff referred to as full-spectrum extraction protocols. Based on conversations I overheard, these more intensive treatments were reserved for what they called the principal sisters and a few specially designated initiates, Torres noted. The rejuvenation effects were apparently far more dramatic than those provided to even their most elite clients. One staff member mentioned a biological reset of approximately 30 years following a complete 5th-level extraction. Torres' final transmission included encrypted files containing photographs, audio recordings, and facility schematics. Along with a message, "If you're receiving this, they've found me. Everything I've documented is real. The Sheppard continuity exists. It has infiltrated the highest levels of power, and its influence is growing." Torres' disappearance was barely noticed by mainstream media, but his final transmission sparked renewed interest in underground research communities. The encrypted files, though heavily corrupted, contained enough verifiable information to confirm many of Richardson's original theories and expand understanding of the organization's current operations. Most significant was evidence suggesting the Luminous Future Foundation was preparing for a major expansion of its activities. Internal documents referenced a convergence initiative scheduled to coincide with an upcoming planetary alignment, with preparations for simultaneous 5th-level extractions at facilities across the country. The documents indicated this coordinated event would involve the largest vessel cohort in our history and was expected to yield unprecedented regenerative potential for the principal sisters. Further investigation revealed unusual patterns in missing person statistics over the previous 5 years. While overall missing persons reports had remained relatively stable nationally, there had been a significant increase in disappearances fitting a specific profile. Individuals between 16 and 25 years of age, from disadvantaged backgrounds, often with histories in foster care or juvenile detention, and typically from communities with limited resources for extensive search efforts.